Hello again, everyone. Welcome to our 2025 forecast, which we are recording on January 6th, 25. As you can see on your screen, I want to take just one little brief moment and thank everybody for your prayers and wellness wishes with the loss of Leroy's mother, who transitioned back to spirit world just before Christmas. It is what led to the change of the date in doing this forecast. So she's at a better place right now. We are grateful that she is no longer suffering or in pain. And as I said earlier, go to the light, Mom. And so appreciate again all your prayers and well wishes. If you're just starting this recording and you're seeing it on YouTube, or well, I guess if you're listening live, I also wanted to say that if you go to our YouTube channel, which is Evolutionary Astronet, in the comments of this recording, you should see the PDF for all of these PowerPoint slides that I'm going to show so that you can access them at your leisure and even print them out if you would like to. So let me get started here for us. And I gotta approve the meeting being recorded. And hold on just a second. I'm gonna see if I can um, release. There we go. Make my screen as big as I can for everybody. Here are what I call our housekeeping slides and the ways that you can reach us, study with us, get a session with me if you would like to. And here is a workshop that I did in 2023 for the Manitoba Astrological Society about the ingresses of four of the outer planets. I include Chiron with the planets these days. And so as you can see on your screen, we have both Neptune and Uranus going into new signs in 2025. As I have been prepping this over the last few days, I'm like, holy moly, there's a lot going on. I think 2025 is going to be as busy as all the conjunctions in 2020, maybe even busier. So I referenced this a little bit back and forth as I was prepping for this webinar. I highly recommend this little workshop for you. It'll give you a lot more detail than what I can go into tonight with all of us. I always like to start out with the numerology. And if you haven't figured it out yet, we're entering a 9-year and we are finishing up a 9-year cycle. You can see how you do the math on your screen there. And so this is kind of like a culmination year for us. And it asks us in many ways to let go of what no longer works in our world, to bring it to completion, resolution. It's an excellent time for doing therapies and processing the last 8 years, this lifetime, past lives, if you feel so inclined. There's also a time period to lay seed thoughts for how you would like to renew and start a brand new 9-year cycle next year. 9 years and 1 year's overlap. 9 years culminate and start, 1 year start and still finish up. So we will find both of those going on. It's a little more theme to bring things to completion right now this year. I'm not going to read everything on our screens tonight because I have a lot of slides. So I'm going to skip over things, but again, you're going to have all of this to access. Last year, we had Mercury in the fire element, which is Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius for 6 months. This year, Mercury's in the fire element for 5 months. It still maintains quite a bit of energy in that spark of destiny, as we like to call the fire element of the sign. So you can see the retrograde dates here. You can see we have a lot of retrograde in the fire element. That's how we come up with all those 5 months. So it can be some feisty communication communications this year, just like it was last year. Every time there's a Mercury retrograde, I do a specific webinar in more detail for you, okay? Here's the ingress chart, all right? And what I want to point out is this is the first year since 1779 where we have a New Year's chart with Pluto in Aquarius. Now, it is what we call a splash pattern, excuse me, not splash. I'll show you that in the next screen. But what I want to point out to you in our New Year's chart is we have the mystical rectangles going on. That's where we have two or more sextiles and two or more trines making this elongated square to each other. Why did I say two mystical triangles? I got the wrong word. Well, I'm not going to worry about it. But the other thing that's going on, rectangles, that's my word, rectangles. We also, though, have this one right here. Here is a mystical rectangle. This one is made up by two or more semi-squares. I'm pointing to the symbols here, and two or more sesqui-squares or sesqui-squadrates. So as you can see, it creates a lot of active energy for the intent and energy and ingress of this year. So because the mystical rectangle is trines and sextiles, that's where I made my mix up here. You can look at these in more detail, but sextiles and trines, we can offset some of the intensity of the oppositions that we see going on in these charts. I probably don't have to tell anybody about the Mars Pluto opposition around New Year's and the mass event that happened in New Orleans. New Orleans is very special to us because Leroy went to college there. We love that city. And I don't know if you caught the news recently, but they found two ice coolers by the gentleman who drove the truck down Bourbon Street. And they would have been horrific bombs if he would have known what he was doing. Thank our lucky stars or our trines and sextiles that made the situation a lot less worse than what it could have been. When we have semi-squares and sesqui-squares, we have planets going into yin phase with each other, which can create inner energy and processing and inner reflections. However, the planets involved are in fire and air elements. And so those are the active polarities, and that creates a lot of energy. So it's in, out, in, out, in, out. And that can almost feel what this year is going to be like. With this splash pattern, it's active, and then we got to go inward and take a rest. And it's active, and we got to go inward and take a rest. So just remember this as you go through all of these ingresses that I'm going to show you. We have got to pace ourselves through all this energy. And of course, we still have that T-square from Mercury, Jupiter, with the Jupiter-Saturn square going on that is always asking us to adapt and learn and make sense of our world. This mutable T-square fits in with that 9 year of numerology and bringing things to deeper understandings, completions, resolutions. Now, because this is the first ingress chart in 240 some years with Pluto in Aquarius, I wanted to go back to the last Pluto ingress, which was the third one. And this is where I put up a patterning for you. Emmy Jones is an astrologer who created what is called the 7 planetary patterns. And this, as you can see, with everything just splashed around the chart, is what is called the splash pattern. It's energy all over the place. And so again, here was when Pluto last went into Aquarius for the next 18 years, 2 decades. And if you start looking at the aspects, we have trines, oppositions, T-squares. I called it a mystical triangle again. I had to make a note. I know it is mystical rectangles, but I'm going to correct it for your PDFs as you look at them. As you can see, when Pluto went into Aquarius, we had a plethora of oppositions going on in the chart. And you can look at this. I did this from Washington, D.C. If you follow me, I like to use 0-degree Aries charts for mundane or collective, because then we can look at it no matter where in the world we are. It just shows those opposing viewpoints we have between conservative and progressive principles taking place all over the planet. And, there's been a lot of talk about how so many different countries, it seems like their leaders and governments have just really taken somewhat of a swing, or sometimes maybe big swings, to what we will call more autocratic or conservative principles. That is that tail end of Pluto and Capricorn. But remember, we're going to have a lot more Pluto in Aquarius than we ever had in Capricorn. Pluto was in Capricorn 15 years, in Aquarius 20 years. And so it will take some time to really have this sense of Pluto shifting into Aquarius. I think we'll really start to notice it this year with Neptune in Aries, Saturn in Aries, Uranus in Gemini. Stay tuned, we'll see. But each year that goes by, we'll see more and more of the Pluto in Aquarius. Time will tell whether there are swings to the progressive side of the pendulum. There will be. How much? It's going to depend upon what each of us in our collective areas choose to do and how active we choose to be. And so you can study this chart. You can refer back to this chart. Sometimes astrologers like to go with the first time a planet ingresses with long-term cycles. I've used that. But when I looked at this one, I went, I think I'm going to use this one maybe a little bit over the next few decades. So while we have all these oppositions, we also have these trines, as you can see, and we have these sextiles that can hopefully help diffuse, to use that word, some of the intensity and smooth the way to come together with some of these oppositions. These are my Pluto and Aquarius words if you've not heard them yet. Detach from any situation, objectify it, then individuate and innovate. Be able to move away from it, look at it as broadly as we can. How do we want to break free, move, be different? And then how do we want to choose to fill up the energy or space and move forward differently than we have before? This is what we can all do on an individual basis so that we can do that Aquarian liberation into who we each uniquely are as individuals. And if we're doing that on an individual basis, then we help do it on a collective. So I want to go through Pluto and Aquarius a little fast. I cannot ignore it, though. Again, you can see here, it's just going to be that dominant base note. One of the things that happens when slower moving planets go from Capricorn to Aquarius, that earth to air energy, and it just makes it feel like we're going to speed up. Time seems to speed up. Aquarius contains the past, the future, and the present all together. And we have to make sense of what is going on in our world. If it's the past, how do we let it go? If it's the future, how do we move into it? If it's the present, how do we address it? Well, this is going to happen on a collective level, and this is really what we're going to see in consensus society. And through this 2 decade transit, Pluto in Aquarius is going to ebb back and forth, go back, go forward, sway in the middle. And again, it's going to be us as collectives to decide which one is going to ebb and flow the strongest. What has a tendency to happen with the fixed air of Aquarius is that we can build up to cataclysmic evolution events that just shook us. It would have been, again, much worse in New Orleans if the two bombs and coolers would have went off or would have changed things dramatically. Chances are we're going to see some of those events in the world somewhere, someplace this year, the next few years. How will it shake us up? Will we try and return to the past, like thinking we can Capricorn control everything? Or will we go about changing things collective as societies and basically work with the healing of our wounded so they don't have to act out this much? One of the things I want to bring up here about the Leo Aquarius polarity is it contains the archetype of royalty and elitism. And what it can be, especially in consensus societies, because consensus in the world of evolutionary astrology is approximately 7 out of 10 people on the planet, any country, any race. And so, what we have in that consensus world is we create these upper classes. They can be blood, status, race, money, power. And they want to be in charge. They want consensus wants to be secure. And so this is that archetype where we create those millionaires, those billionaires, those royalties. And you can just see if you're paying any attention to the US politics right now and Elon Musk, who is the richest man in the world since 2021, and is jokingly being called President Musk, um, especially by Democrats to get under Donald Trump's skin. But you can just see how the example is with him of how he's trying to, outside of government, run it. And so, how much will he be able to do that? How long will he get away with that before some of the masses say, nope, I'm not going to let you do this. We are going to rise up. We are going to rebel in some way. This kind of elitism, so to speak, will take place in all kinds of countries all over the world the next few years, the next 2 decades, because these inequalities throughout history, sooner or later, there's some rebalancing and, re-equalizing until it happens again with patriarchal distortions. Stay tuned. For the US, I think it's really going to start to take place in about um, 26, 27, when transiting Pluto goes over the USA South Node in Aquarius. I think that's when we'll really start to see the masses rising up. However, Aquarius following Capricorn. Capricorn wants to continue to have the control. So we will see that battle between autocratic and democratic societies continuing to take place. Don't think that the Democratic Party has died. Donald Trump barely won by, I think right now it's about 1.3% of the popular vote. That's pretty split in the USA. So stay tuned as we go through this year. Um, Technological advances will clash with ethical norms. Not going to talk a lot about AI or how Pluto and Aquarius rules technology. That's pretty well known, but it will start to clash with ethics. We'll look at that a little bit with Neptune in Aries. Climate change, which is going to be happening with any planetary transit right now. But uh, how we'll look at it with Pluto and Aquarius, there's more and more people on the planet sharing, you know, a certain amount of resources, and it can create geopolitical unrest and clashing for limited resources. This is going to be the part of Donald Trump's tariffs. They're starting to narrow the band of the tariffs down to three areas. I don't remember all three, but the one that stuck out for me is rare earth minerals, because any technological device you use, from your car to your phone to your computer to your TV, takes rare earth minerals. And as population increases, they become more and more uh, expensive because they're harder to find. And the countries that have them start to want to keep them. You're gonna see that really rise in the news this year, as we start to want to control those rare earth minerals, to control all of our technological appliances. This time around, Pluto and Aquarius, compared to the last time in the 1770s and 80s, we have that technology to have knowledge spread so fast. What it can mean for us progressing is that the patriarchal distortions on the planet, which are unsustainable, are going to be more easily exposed, understood, and rebelled against as time goes by. We'll start to see some of those happening, this year with this transit. Now, as we always say with Aquarius, in those future orientated messages, this is for all of us individually. When they start coming into consciousness of their own volition again, 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 doing dishes, driving your car, that's your own soul telling you how to go forward. Pay attention, make your best effort to make your steps forward, however you're understanding it for yourself. Yes, it can make us feel insecure, but the more we can find the plutonian courage to move forward, the more we break free into being who we came here to be this time around. And of course, finally, one of the things that we always have to deal with, no matter what planet is transiting Aquarius, we all have Uranus, Aquarius in the 11th house in our chart. This is going to be where you have trauma. There are very few of us souls on the planet that are not conditioned by trauma, this life, past lives. It's an intense disturbance by a shocking event or stress that happens, and it has the ability to dictate subconscious behaviors. So here again, we're in a 9 year for healing, for bringing things into consciousness and resolution. However, we need to make the effort. All of us being the one seeking the healing, and all of us learning how to progress our abilities to be a healer or to help facilitate healing for others. See how that is going to happen for you. Part of that trauma is sometimes psychological and sometimes it's physical. We may see more news coming along about the H5N1 avian flu virus, or what they call bird flu. Here we go again. Let's see how we choose to address it. It's already crossing over from animals into humans, especially farm workers, or, well, mainly farm workers, we'll call it that. What are we doing to address their exposure? I, as an astrologer, choose to stay neutral on the subject of vaccinations. I am supporting those who don't want it. I support those who do want it. It's your freedom, Aquarius, and your choice for you, however you perceive it to work best for you. We will see this in the news. The noroviruses are mainly on your cruise ships or anywhere you have anybody really crouched together. If you're not aware of this, bacteria and viruses, which are ruled by Pluto, they mutate. They want to survive. And Pluto in Aquarius for the next 2 decades will cause a lot of these bacteria and viruses to mutate, especially your airborne ones. So stay tuned. We'll see how that shows up in the news for us. Finishing up the Mars retrograde, we still have one more Mars-Pluto opposition to get through. It's not going to happen until later this spring. This Mars retrograde was so active. I did a free webinar. It's on our YouTube channel. If you want more information, by all means, you can go there and do your own little reviews of this information in more detail. But we're probably not done with the Pluto-Mars violence and or the rebellions. Again, this middle retrograde was in the ingress chart. So the Mars-Pluto oppositions are going to be with us. Whoops, here it is. Wrong little note here. They're going to be with us throughout the rest of this year. But have hope, because the Aquarius polarity to Mars retrograde in Leo, there will be new leaders that will be emerging. Justin Trudeau in Canada announced today that he was going to step down when his party or the country, I don't know quite how they do it there, creates new leadership. There will be new leaders showing up during Pluto and Aquarius, and specifically through this Mars retrograde that we have coming on. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on the nodal axis in Pisces-Virgo. And by the way, 1 week from today, we can all meet here again because I'm going to have another webinar specifically on this nodal axis transit, going into a little more detail than I am right now in just a few slides. Whew. Is it active enough? We're going to have a Venus retrograde going over the North Node and Saturn and Neptune 3 times. We're going to have a Mercury retrograde over Saturn once, but it's going to go over the North Node and Neptune 3 times. So then we've got the Sun. That's always involved in any planetary retrogrades. Whew, we got a lot going on here. Here's your dates. Here's your degrees. Let's look a little bit at the interpretation, the psychology that's involved. When we have that South Node transiting through Virgo, because it is an earth element, it is definitely going to bring up all of our issues around resources, money, and finances. South Node is called our Achilles heel, but it's also called our gifts that we have developed from past lives. How is this going, or previous in this lifetime, how is this going to show up for you over the next 18, 19 months? You can have resources lost or gained depending upon your own individual prior efforts and karma. We're going to watch this also take place on a collective level, country by country. What we really have to watch out for, though, with the South Node in Virgo, is it can almost feel like a year and a half of Mercury retrograde. Detail overloads. We can have all the famous Virgo words, procrastination, doubt, excuse making. And what we really want to do is work through wherever we emotionally feel like our cup is half empty. What isn't working? How can we use that Virgo analyzing to then make those efforts to self-improve? Because healthy South Node in Virgo is gentle and loving. We can initiate new diet, exercise, and rest for ourselves. We want to look for where our cup is half full in the same identical situations where we think it's just going to pieces. And we have to make that repeated effort until change and growth is achieved. And of course, this is where we learn how to give. After we learn how to give to ourselves, how do we give to another? And how do we expand that ability to give to others with healthy boundaries? More details on next week's webinar. How do we expand that larger and larger and larger until we are of service to the entire planet in all forms of consciousness? This is what we're going to work with over the next year and a half. Now, this is really germane to evolutionary astrology. Both the Virgo and Pisces archetypes deal with sadomasochism, okay? Basically, what we're taught with consensus religious conditionings. God is male, outside of us, judging us, and perfect. Well, why would something perfect create this mess? Natural spiritual principles observe, correlate, found in nature. Universal source is an energetic force beyond gender. It's everywhere, inside, outside. We know it out there to the degree we know it in here. And it's an evolving force. It's a co-creative process. Every time we make a baby step forward, source itself evolves. And so perfecting Virgo is a process through action and effort with Piscean faith and trust. Here's the sadomasochistic patterns that we all look at. You can have the victim masochist in both Virgo and Pisces, and you can have the victor sadist in both Virgo and Pisces as well. I'm getting a little better. I'm watching my screen go down and up. And so, Leroy, if it's something I need to answer, interrupt me because I don't know how to get it to go back up if I start looking at it. If you're talking, Leroy, you're not unmuted. Okay. Maybe he doesn't have anything to say. We're always in different rooms, and sometimes I can hear him. When we have that North Node in Pisces, this is where we are striving to develop on an emotional or egoic level together. We want to make the effort to simplify our life, prioritize what's truly important, get out of that Virgo busyness, quiet down so we can actually hear and emotionally intuit what the universe or universal source is trying to say to us. It is our intent to have religious and or spiritual breakthroughs, depending upon where our evolutionary state of consciousness is. And something to remember to help you a little bit with peace is that all states of human consciousness, everyone wants to feel safe and secure. And almost everyone wants inner and outer peace. So how can we make an effort to find that with others, with our family, with our friends and neighbors, with those we maybe have a little disagreement with? How can you help yourself go out in nature, the mutable modality here, and be able to breathe, relax, and just allow the energy of the universe to come through for you? Searching for common principles and emotional connections with others, even when we've just got to agree to disagree. So again, that's a nutshell. We'll go into this in more detail in next week. I did want to give you the eclipse charts. Here's the lunar eclipse chart. And here is the USA chart that I use. Okay, July 4th, but I use the Michael Mancasey chart with 9:37 a.m. with a fifth house Pluto for the USA chart. North Node eclipse season, intent, rebirth on deep spiritual levels, like we've been talking, but the distortions, escape, deny, addictions, overlapping kite patterns here with these oppositions, the kite patterns, trines, and sextiles. Ease up. It can create some harmony, understandings. It can help us releasing all of those sadomasochistic patterns. And it can also help us with these Aries planets to put these spiritual inspirations into practice. One of the things we're going to find with the nodal axis in Pisces-Virgo is that it's going to be very activated in the USA chart, especially when it just goes in to Virgo South Node, Pisces North Node, the beginning of this year. The lunar eclipse, March 14th, is going to activate the natal Mars Neptune. We're still coming off of transiting Neptune here, okay, opposing its own natal position in the USA chart. Any July 4th charts? How will lies be exposed? Who can acknowledge them and see it? Will there be attempts to cut back on healthcare and social support systems? The Republicans or the Project 25 that wants to eliminate the Department of Education or move things into other departments, maybe they might succeed with that. It was Jimmy Carter, by the way, who recently passed as 100. It was Jimmy Carter in his term as president that created the Department of Education. That reflection of presidents, past tense, and sometimes we like them better. I wonder if we're going to like the next president who we reelected better as time goes by. We're going to have to wait and see on that one. But will there be attempts even more to force religion into public schools? I went to support my younger sister, who is a third grade teacher. My mom and I went to her Christmas program and then visited her class of third graders just before Christmas. And yes, we're used to doing those Christmas programs in the public schools. And most of the songs are about reindeers and Santa Claus. They kind of, not so much in that religious. But here we are in the gymnasium with their program and in big block letters, "In God We Trust." Our governor, Kristi Noem, who's going to become the Secretary of Homeland Security, I think it is, in charge of the border. I'll stay away. She got a law passed in our conservative legislature. I live in South Dakota. About 3 years ago, saying every public school in the U.S. in our state had to put "In God We Trust" somewhere inside a public place of their buildings. I saw that and I was just like, oh man. I was like, whoa, okay, what are we going to do with the nodal axis transit here and how it is so impactful in the USA chart? Just that increase we've seen with transiting Neptune Pisces opposed to the USA natal Neptune and Virgo, and that increase in Christian nationalism. The transiting nodes may see that kind of almost emotionally cemented in, especially over the next 2 years, with the Republican Party having the executive branch in both the Senate and House in Congress. Stay tuned. Here's the solar eclipse at 9 degrees Aries, which in the USA chart then activates the Sun-Saturn square. And I think this is where we'll really start to see some of the immigrant deportations in the news. Not that it won't start in January this month. It can, but when these eclipses come about, I think there'll be some exposures or intensities or stories in the news that can tug on people's heartstrings and have us going, wait a minute, what are we doing? How much of violence will we observe before enough of us say no? And of course, the cardinal modality, which is Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, that will always bring up the gender issues, Cancer, Capricorn, anima, animus, and it will bring up the race issues as well. Stay tuned. We'll see how all of that stuff goes. If Donald Trump follows through and starts in on the tariffs, I think when we get to these North Node eclipses, this is when we'll really start to notice enough on a massive level our price increases that are going to come along, because tariffs are just passed along to the consumer via the companies. They pay more, we pay more, passed on to us. I don't know. I just have a sense that inflation is not going to decrease. It could quite easily increase if Donald Trump follows through on his tariffs. Here's the Venus retrograde that's going to come up this spring. That again is part of this Aries-Pisces energy that we're going to see all the way through 2025. Here's all your dates of Venus retrograde. I'm going to be doing a public lecture for the Washington State Astrological Association on February 13th. If you're interested in that, you can just Google Washington State Astrological Association and go there if you are interested in participating. There is a fee, but it's open to members and non-members as well. So here's your dates for you. Venus retrograde, March 1st through April 12th, 11 Aries to 24 Pisces. All of the conjunctions, with the exception of the Sun, all of the conjunctions for Venus with Saturn, Neptune, North Node take place in Pisces, except for the very last one down here that's going to be early Aries. Death and rebirth, Pisces, Aries, of our value systems in every area of life. The nodal axis, Neptune, Saturn, Aries retrograde back to Pisces. This Venus retrograde cycle is going to be intensified because of this. So what are you being asked to release in your world, especially this spring, this first half of 25? Oh, Neptune and Saturn all the way through 2025. What are we being asked to initiate and start over with, or start anew with? Any sense of anger and frustration is where we are not honoring our own values. However, if we want to do any of that Piscean avoidance, we can create those Arian accidents and upsets. So pay attention to your intuition this year. Honor it so that you don't have to have those Aries upsets come into your life. Now, in evolutionary astrology, our values determine what we perceive we need. I don't value a BMW. I don't value a fur coat. So I don't need it. I don't desire it. So values determine what we perceive we need, which determines what we desire, and then take action on. Venus, values and needs. Mars, desires and actions. Now, when Venus retrograde follows a Mars retrograde, it's going to slow down our actions this spring until our desires align with what we value. So even right now, at the beginning of this year, What's important to you? Put your energy in that direction and it'll help you move through the Venus retrograde a little smoother and easier. When Venus is retrograde, in general, we are having to break free from consensus values and move towards our own individuated value systems. Then a major theme with this Venus retrograde is going to be, what do we spiritually value? What gives us ultimate value and meaning in life? And that's where we want to move. And that's where we want those Aries initiations to take place. So if your world is not working the way you want it to, especially come this spring during Venus's retrograde, this is where you got to slow down and review what's of value to me, what's important to me, what do I need to work with. Now, here's something about this particular Venus retrograde. You've perhaps heard that every 8 years, Venus retrograde makes a five-pointed star in the heavens and the skies. You can follow this: Venus stationary retrograde, Venus interior conjunction, Venus stationary direct, Venus exterior conjunction. You can follow it: Venus heliacal rising, which is where Venus retrograde first rises as a morning star. In a lot of astrology in general, when Venus makes that initial heliacal rising, that's what we kind of call the rebirthing of a Venus cycle. Comes from our ancestors visually watching Venus sink and Venus rise, because Venus retrograde's interior conjunction is short. All right, that's basically just weeks, whereas Venus direct on the other side of the sun can go into the underground for, oh gosh, I don't know, 6, 8 weeks. Don't quote me on that one exactly. For the first time in 100 years, Venus is going to have a heliacal rising in Pisces. Now, that's because Venus goes retrograde, okay, reversing through the signs of that five-pointed star you see, and it reverses about 2, 3 degrees every 8 years. And so again, for the first time in about 100 years, this is going to be the first time this point on the Venus retrograde cycle has a heliacal rising in Pisces. And it will do that when it's retrograde in Aries-Pisces, retrograde to Pisces, retrograde to Pisces, Aquarius, for about the next 100 years. So this is a major shift for our Venus retrograde. And it also points to that deep spiritual pondering and awakening that's so activated by all the planets right now this year. This is going to be followed up by the Mercury retrograde, same time as the Venus retrograde, March 15th through April 7th here. 1 conjunction to Saturn, but 3 to the North Node and Neptune, okay? All of them take place in Pisces, except conjunction with the Sun like Venus, and the last conjunction Mercury makes to Neptune will also be early degrees Aries. The third conjunction of Venus and Mercury to Neptune this spring, they're going to take place at that, 0, 1, 2 degrees Aries. That is where Saturn and Neptune will have their 1 conjunction in Aries, February 20, 26, 045 Aries. So there's a lot that's just really having us release and surrender, that in 2026 is going to really create those Aryan outbursts to come along. Briefly, with Mercury, here's the messaging to the Venus retrograde cycle. So, are we going to go into the Piscean avoidance of any sense of injustice and just escape into a spiritual retreat? I don't want to be a part of all that on earth. Well, you live here. Or are we going to retreat into substance indulgences? If so, we got to show up. We have to participate on the planet somehow, some way. We don't get to just say it doesn't involve me. It does. If we go into the distortions of our anger and revenge, that um, uh, uh, anger side to guilt, and I'm going to get you before you get me. Okay, I'm going to go after them, throw out all those immigrants, and throw out all those people who were, fighting for justice over January 6th. Then it brings up the necessity to confront, where are we lying to ourselves? And where are we buying into conditioned beliefs? Then what is the ultimate natural truth of Pisces? Some may be able to recognize it. Perhaps there's a lot of consensus that isn't going to be able to. With Mercury having most of the retrograding Aries considered versus impulsive communications. When Mercury goes retrograde this spring with Venus, count to 10, count to 20, count to 100. Really think your way through it. And then try to have those communications as smoothly as you possibly can. Self-reflections, Pisces, to clarify thoughts, actions, and define our own self-identity. Here again, simplifying life, what's truly important, searching for those deepest levels of truth, quieting down to hear what source is actually saying to us. I'll have a Mercury retrograde webinar in more detail. I'll include Venus in it. It's at the last of my slides with the date. Don't remember what that is right now. I don't know if I put that in there. Oh, March 12th. That's when I'll do that one. And so moving along, I want just a couple slides here. These were in last year's forecast, but with Saturn and Neptune retrograding back into Pisces, we really have to kind of work with the ending of this Piscean stuff. And one more time, 9-year universally. Collective environmental depressions, as well as perhaps individually, as reality doesn't support our ideals, our dreams, our ability to provide for ourselves and others. This is why we've seen so much about addictions being raised around this whole subject. Any substance can be used or abused. You can include food in this addiction thing as well. And a continued breakdown of societal structures that no longer work. For us here in the United States, we can see it in our political parties. We can see it in our healthcare system. I read an article recently that in the US we spend, depends, 2 to 3 times as much on a healthcare service as your other countries with universal healthcare. 2 to 3 times as much money, and a third of all of our healthcare in this country is wasted on inefficiency, ineffective testing that we've got to do 3 times because everybody's a specialist, and then all of our paperwork inefficiencies that go on. So that can continue to happen, as well as in this country, religious systems breaking down, more nuns, more of our agnostics rising up, which is scaring the consensus Christian nationalists. We can also see perhaps more destruction of our social progress and safety nets. This might be a biggie in Congress over the next year. Stay tuned. And of course, destruction of our environment and species with climate change. So we're really having to continue to change that physical relationship that we have with the material world, Saturn. What will the Trump tariffs do? Now, I do think that renewable energies are going to continue to rise regardless of of politics. I think we will continue to broadly see social support systems gain ground on the planet. It might be a long arc of justice that we really have to be socially active with. Stay tuned. We'll see how this turns out, collectively. I also think that part of this Saturn waning Neptune and the religious, spiritual, letdowns and ponderings of what does it all mean, it's freeing up the energy and space for spiritual initiations to come through. Consensus will resist. They will continue to have their quote unquote wars against anything that, is perceived as progress, creating those insecurities. Wait till these two planets get into Aries. More of that. And I also will say, and this comes from this Pisces archetype, so much of our gender issue debates come from the lack of recognizing and understanding reincarnation. There is a natural discomfort when lifetimes of a specific gender enforce us to switch over to the opposite gender for evolutionary lessons. When Jeffrey Green taught this, he would say, it's like buying a new pair of blue jeans. The first time you wear those blue jeans, they're stiff, uncomfortable. And you got to wash and wear till they start to fit. And pretty soon they become your favorite pair of blue jeans. And then all of a sudden they're so threadbare, you can't wear them anymore. And you got to go get a new pair of blue jeans. This is how we have a tendency, especially in consensus world. So many lifetimes in a gender till we can't learn anymore and we have to switch over. If we had some of that type of perspective, knowledge, and acceptance and counseling, we wouldn't treat the whole gender identity issues as, the sky's falling apart. We would understand 2 spirit, 3 spirit, and allow each soul to be where they want to be as they're learning this lesson. So, can we see, perhaps with Neptune going from Pisces to Aries, a better understanding and acceptance of reincarnation? I got my fingers crossed. I got my intent there. Please, 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 because I do think that when Pluto moves through Aquarius for the next 2 decades, we will have a renaissance of what we call that New Age thought again. And Neptune in Aries is going to bring forth those spiritual initiations. And, those of you who show up to listen to me, verbalize my opinions on this subject, you're part of it. How are you going to choose to be active with it? So we're finishing up and rebirthing a 165-year cycle of religious and spiritual evolution with Neptune, Pisces, Aries. There's your dates on your screen. Neptune is pretty evenly divided with 14-year cycles in each of the 12 signs during that 165-year cycle. EA looks at Neptune as the closest archetype. Neptune, Pisces, 12th house, same archetype in EA. It looks as that is the closest archetype we have to universal source, or that totality of consciousness, unconsciousness, for all forms of consciousness, all species. Okay? So here we are initiating a new search to make sense of our existence on the planet in this space-time context. And that search to make sense of our world is going to start to gain more and more consciousness in this context and momentum to move forward, starting to maybe realize the mystical side of all formalized religions. From the perspective of EA, there are two kinds of belief systems, inclusive versus exclusive. Inclusive, giving, sharing, including. Excluding, exclusive, taking, hoarding, and excluding. Almost all religion has various mixtures of both, but the more condensed religions are into their rules, the more they can start to condense exclusion. Okay. Islam cannot include Christianity. Christianity cannot include Islam. Expand it from there. I mean, really, anytime you're working with your beliefs, am I including or excluding? And so this is brief. If you want more on Neptune and Aries, again, my great ingress decade workshop has a few more slides and details. So religious and spiritual upheavals are going to be initiated, and that includes war and violence in the name of whatever our belief system is. Now, we may also see some religious dogmas reap the distortions of their own makings as more and more people, Pluto and Aquarius, look at it logically and go, that don't make sense. I don't think I'm going to participate in your rituals anymore. I might look for some of my own rituals in my world that make sense for me. And maybe those really might be learning how to commune with nature and commune with all species. We can see Neptune and Aries create extreme frustrations and actions as the need for freedom. Aries wants ultimate freedom. It's the first archetype. Is going to clash with those larger forces of power, especially the ultimate source of power that says, here's the space-time you're stuck in this lifetime. You don't get to have the freedom to do all this. And even people like Elon Musk will have to work through this. Richest man in the world, all the money possible. That doesn't mean he gets to run our government. He will run into finding that out as 2025 moves through. I got some of my ideas on when their bromance might break up. Stay tuned here. But, so what we've got with Neptune in Aries starting a new cycle, broadly, we've got this spiritual evolution, and individually, collectively. But we also have this clash between the Aries desire to just manifest, be, do, become, with the Neptunian desire to have deeper meaning, what we will call transcendence in the world of EA. And so it goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with us. So when things are working for you in creating in your world, great, then maybe your beliefs and actions are in alignment. When you can't make things move forward to manifest, it might be time to go inward and reflect on what is highest and best for you to create in your world. And what we will also find relative to Neptune being the totality of consciousness, unconsciousness, or all species, is that all forms of consciousness, all species desire to survive and rebirth. And this will include Gaia, planet Earth, going into Aries. And as Jeffrey Green would sometimes say, if you could step back and really look at that blue dot, humans would look like Cancer. And what would the Gaia want to do? Throw off the Cancer. Stay tuned. We will see what happens. That's what may come about, Pluto and Aquarius, through viruses, bacteria, fungi. So all forms have a right to exist and flourish. Will we acknowledge this through Neptune's transit in Aries? We also, though, with the intensification of climate change, see an increase in species extinctions and clashes, and how we are going to figure out how to survive together. So, all states of human consciousness desire to dissolve barriers to universal source, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, so that merging of our individual power with the cosmic whole. Now, Neptune works through cycles of confusion and clarity. And no matter what sign Neptune transits, we will have cycles of confusion and clarity. With Aries, the cycles of confusion will still create that alienation, disorientation, etc. But we're going to resist that confusion cycle when it's in Aries because we don't want to lose control. And we might try to cling to our past. We might try to cling to whatever we have. In other words, project that past forward. To the degree that we are clinging and projecting what no longer serves us, it will be the degree to which we have the Aries upsets that might create even larger degrees of confusion and letdown. So the more that you can accept that and release and surrender, this isn't what's working in my world, the easier you will move through the void. Because in between confusion and clarity, Neptune, Pisces, 12th house leaves us in a void of existence. And that's so we cannot easily replace that merging with source with a substitute. So make peace, turn inward, even with Neptune and Aries. What am I to manifest, source? What am I to do, source? How am I to be on the planet, source? And ask and ask. And then sooner or later, of its own volition, clarity will come. You will have new inspiration. You will know how to go forward and how to manifest for yourself again. So work with the confusion cycle and the void to decrease Neptune and Aries upsets. And that will allow you to have clarity as easily as possible, even though you are not in charge. It will allow you to have that ability to really move forward in your world. And especially beyond 25 into 26, 27, etc., as Neptune gains speed moving through Aries. Now, I want to just say something here. Neptune and Saturn, I said this last year, maybe I've said it a couple of years, but we have Saturn retrograde cycles 4 months, Neptune 5 months. 23, 24, 25, Saturn and Neptune and Pisces turn stationary retrograde close to each other, days, week apart. Increased opportunities to release the old. And so we can let it go. And again, hold that space to create a new. They have a 34 to 36 year cycle together. And again, we already said that's going to rebirth at 1 degree Aries. Well, here we are, one more retrograde cycle in 25. Even though they go into Aries, there's going to be that energy more to release and rebirth. We're going to get into 26, 27, and we're going to find that with their retrograde cycles, they're going to go stationary direct together, building that momentum going forward the rest of this decade to really create new forms of reality. We'll do this individually. We'll do this on a collective level. Here is Saturn, including your Saturn aspects in 2025 for you. We're finishing up 3 of its waxing semi-squares to Pluto. Okay, got crescent phase. What can I manifest in my world? In single aspects, Saturn's going to then move into, in 2025, 3 waning sextiles to Uranus. Talk about those in a moment. If you don't know this, Saturn in EA is the individuated consciousness. So here's its retrograde degree in early Aries, how far it moves back in to Pisces for you. Moving forward, Saturn in Aries, the initiation of new structures and how to collectively live together. Saturn is the individuated structure of consciousness, what we are conscious of and how we use that to create form and physical in our world on every level. So we want to create a new for ourselves individually, that we're also going to be doing it on a collective level. Just Saturn in Aries alone, 2.5 years. Historically, Saturn, Neptune as a planetary pair as related to evolving societies based upon broad socialist principles. You could study the history of Russia and the USSR, and you can go back to every Saturn Neptune conjunction and find it a little fascinating on how those socialist principles have progressed, regressed through that specific country and geographical area. Well, these socialist principles on broad levels, sometimes they will include war and revolutions to overcome controlling leaders and governments. And sometimes it will include new governments based upon democratic principles. So we're looking at this on broad levels. What will every country on the planet do over the next 3 years, 25, 26, 27 of Saturn actually being in the sign of Aries? Stay tuned. Some countries will progress. Some countries might regress. It will depend upon the collective citizenry and what it's aware of, what its conditioning factors are, how much the public wants to stand up, what the cataclysms are that they each experience. We will find out. But basically, Saturn in Aries, that collective consciousness is energized to initiate and concentrate control over the masses according to their needs. And this is coming off of, in today's context, Pluto and Capricorn. All that swing to conservative principles and autocratic governments and societies that we've been seeing, those leaders are going to take Saturn in Aries, and they're going to want to have more control, gain it going in the direction they want, because any of those progressive principles scare the bejeebies out of them, according to patriarchal distortions. So we might see inequities exasperated through that Saturn inquiries in Aries a little bit. We don't know exactly how it's going to turn out. And it's not just Pluto and Aquarius. Saturn in Aries for the next 3 years, whatever it wants to initiate socially, it's got to do it with Neptune in Aries and Uranus in Gemini. Again, one more time. Some places will see inclusive principles win the masses over. Others will see exclusive principles win the masses over. This is why I'm saying, I don't care who you are on the planet, you will be participating. How do you choose to participate? Individually, Saturn in Aries, we choose how we will initiate evolving our world according to the context of the space-time that we exist in. We are here to create new routines, to create new structures and new forms. How do you make peace with what you can and cannot do according to your chronological age, Saturn? I'm in my late 60s. I can't do what I did last time Saturn was in Aries, and I was in my early 30s, I think I was. Yeah, 35. Yep, my early 30s. I can't do that the same way. I'm having to make peace with slowing down, and I'm having to make peace with semi-retiring. I'm having to make peace with what my body can and cannot do. My new initiations are more diet, exercise, and rest in my world. So, Neptune in Aries can be helpful in energizing us on a soul basis to be at peace with our reality as we intend to rebirth physically and metaphysically. Some of us may be setting up rebirthing into going non physical. How gracefully can we do that? If you're a young one, you want to really go forth in your world and create with these initiations. It's going to be unique to each of us. In that Saturn and Aries context, Saturn is going to make waning sextiles to Uranus. And so, what we are looking at here is they had conjunctions in the late 80s, in the late degrees of Sagittarius. The waning sextiles is last quarter phase, the 300-degree mark. They have approximately a 45-year cycle together. They're a unique planetary pair. Saturn individuated consciousness, Uranus individuated unconsciousness. Saturn, when it doesn't like, wants to push it below the surface. Uranus is always pushing it up into our awareness. They go back and forth with each other. Last quarter phase, okay, is really asking us to reflect, to look at what doesn't work in our life, to make sense of it. So we're all having to balance security, especially inner security. Uranus finishing up in Taurus. We're having to balance that inner security with the changes taking place in this world faster and faster than maybe we can keep up with them. So the more inwardly secure we are, the more we can adapt and grow with the changing world, the more we can adapt and grow with the changes taking place in our world. I am still having to adapt with technology. And I have to learn new things with technology. But I also have to reflect and go, I can do this, but I'm not going to do that. I do one social media. I've toyed with doing a second social media, but I don't have 5 social media accounts. Nope, not gonna, just not there at this point in my space and time. So, those Saturn waning sextiles to Uranus, we look at the waning trines, disseminating phase, okay? We look at those waning trines as rewards, but one of the things that I like to say with last quarter phase and even balsamic phase, the last 45 degrees or the last quarter of the circle, we can still have rewards. And you can have them with Saturn waning sextiles to Uranus. If you look back on these last conjunctions and you've been on the planet a while, not an absolute. Young people, this works too from past lives. But if you've really been doing your search for what is truth, show me the truth, show me the truth, expanding individual truth to universal, timeless truth. And if you've been working to be congruent with your beliefs, you may find that these waning sextiles can bring you some outer rewards, just like a waning trine between them can. So it's not all let go, let go, let go. There can be some rewards and manifestations. We're still working with the reality of the physical world of Saturn. Jupiter in Cancer. Here are the aspects in 2025, followed some through into 2026. Jupiter makes more one-off aspects to the outer planets than Saturn. Saturn is 28, 29 years around the zodiac. Jupiter's 12. So Jupiter will make more outer planetary aspects. It's going to be finishing up last quarter square with Saturn. And then it's going to go into 25, 26, and it's going to be making first quarter squares to Chiron. And we're also going to find Jupiter's retrograde cycles later in the year. It's going to skip retrograde cycles in 27 and start over with retrograde cycles early 28 for 4 months. Here is Jupiter moving into Cancer, the evolution of emotional self-reliance and honoring our intuition on emotional levels, honoring in our gut. And with Cancer, Jupiter has got to really honor the emotional cycles of withdrawal and animation. That's how Cancer works. Withdrawal cycles, something triggers us, we go inward. Why did it happen? What's going on? How do I make sense of it? How do I heal? How do I find that center, balance, love myself again? When I reach that inner emotional homeostasis again, I'm the only one who can make myself happy. Then we pop over into the animation cycle. And all of a sudden, we go outward again. We want to emote. We want to share ourselves. We want to give and receive love in new ways. Think of the moon. It goes around the circle of the zodiac once a month. It goes through the 12 signs each every 2.5 days. The moon's constantly going in, out emotionally. It's how we emotionally evolve. That when Jupiter goes into Cancer, and I'll have a webinar on it, but it's far enough along, I didn't choose any dates yet. Jupiter wants to expand any archetype it passes through. So what we've got to watch out for with Jupiter transiting through Cancer is an expansion of the withdrawal animation cycles. It's just not good enough to go inward. I am just going to disappear off the face of the planet and nobody even knows if I'm alive anymore. And when I'm animated, I'm going to be all over the place, positive, negative, etc. So we've really got to watch emotional outbursts, frustration, anger, because it's going to tell us we have got to do some work on internalizing self-love, emotional self-reliance. Again, we are the only ones who can make ourselves happy, regardless of outer circumstances and events. Now, it's also possible if we fall on the victim masochist side of guilt, that some of that emotional frustration and anger can be a message to us that we need to have more equal giving and receiving. Masochists want to give, and they wonder why they don't receive enough back. Healthy boundaries, learning to satisfy your emotional needs yourself. But sometimes anger is our friend saying, oh, not a healthy boundary here. I need to redistribute how we are giving and receiving in this particular situation. We also review and evolve our self-image. That self-image is a moon Cancer archetype. We are constantly and continually doing an inner emotional dialogue, how we feel about ourselves, what we think about ourselves, what our sense of who we are is. And it's been so conditioned, my parents and our culture and our environment and our religion, etc., So when Jupiter moves through Cancer, okay, this can be a time period to mature our emotions, and then it allows us to evolve our self-image. And oh, that's why I act this way. Oh, that old family history and pattern is why I act that way. So our familial patterns are up for review and change. Family we were born into, family we choose to create. Animus exposures and rebalancing. While we have finished up with Pluto and Capricorn, Jupiter going through Cancer for a year is going to bring all those gender issues up to the surface again, especially in the US and other countries in the world, if conservative exclusionary principles try to suppress gender freedoms, gender identity freedoms. We can find that, there could even be extreme examples with Jupiter in Cancer and Saturn, Neptune in Aries around all of this, animus and gender identity and gender switching. And so, what we really want to do is Jupiter in Cancer seek to understand and honor a sense of gender identity within ourselves and with others. How well can you do that? So, briefly, we are still going to be finishing up the Jupiter waxing squares to Saturn. We're not going to have the third one until the middle of next year. So here's those societal crises, first quarter crises in action. The gender issues, Cancer, Capricorn on the last one, immigration, racism, refugees, all of our societal issues. How are we going to be dealing with them? Excluding, including. We'll still be working our ways, ebbing and flowing with them. Saturn and Jupiter are the conscious planets, and so these are our conscious beliefs. These are our conscious norms and laws. Initial conjunction, if you remember, the end of 2020 winter solstice, 0.5 Aquarius. We can have the AI misinformation still coming through with these waxing squares. There's pressure to regulate social media and AI. How is that going to take place country to country? We will also see those technocrats who want to control governments, to control their inventions and technologies. Why do you think Elon Musk gambled on Donald Trump? He saw him as the best person to have control over all of his AI technology, over his EV technologies, although that may backfire electric vehicles, over his social media. We're the Wild West for social media in the United States. The European Union is a lot further along with us over social media. And by the way, how many of you know that China bans TikTok? There is no TikTok in China, even though it's owned by a Chinese company. Stay tuned. Here is Elon Musk's chart. The 738 M comes from, I don't know if it was an autobiography. It has a B rating with the lowest Rodden rating. So he's somewhere around in there. I do think I see him as a third house Pluto in Virgo. He has self-admitted on Saturday Night Live a few years ago that he is Asperger's, the high functioning spectrum of autism. I was curious about his chart, and I put the second um, Jupiter Saturn waxing square from August of last year as the transits of the bi-wheel, because that was about the time we first started hearing the inklings of Elon Musk. He was going conservative with Twitter/X all before when he bought the company. He's been moving that way for a while, but this is where he really started coming out for Donald Trump. And so this is when Jupiter was getting ready to make its transits over his Venus, which it did 3 times. And I thought, oh, that Gemini switch of a third house Pluto, that was just one of the things. We don't have time for his chart, but you've got the chart the best that we know it. I don't know if there's any rectifications from 7:30 a.m. out there or not, but you've got a chart to work with if you want to do some exploring on your own. When I saw that he had Venus at 17, or excuse me, at 19 degrees Gemini, I went, ooh, Donald Trump's chart. Here's his Venus right up here on Donald Trump's Gemini stellium. So the flip to Donald Trump when in I don't know if it was the 2016 election or the 2020 election. I don't know where he was. I can't remember, but he used to be a pretty outspoken progressive Democrat. And he's done that flip, Gemini. So here he is right here, the best buds, the bromance. But he has that sun in Cancer with Donald Trump's Mercury. He has a south node in Leo. No offense, any archetype can be abused or used, but sometimes you will find south nodes in Leo. They are the kings and queens. It's all, if you don't notice me, I will make you notice me, especially if they're not deepening in the inner self love. I saw this south node of Elon on Donald Trump's Pluto, and I went, oof. I don't know how long this love affair is gonna last because there can only be one president. There can only be one king. There can only be one person taking up oxygen in the room. Apparently, he is renting one of the bungalows at Mar-a-Lago that puts him within a few hundred feet of Donald Trump, and he's showing up everywhere. And everybody in Donald Trump's transition team is holding their nose because he does not get to move into the White House. Stay tuned. We shall see how that turns out. Will they make it through the spring lunar solar eclipses together? They might. That might be a breakup. If they don't fall apart with the North Node eclipse season in the spring, I think it will happen by the South Node eclipse season in the fall. Before I show you those, first of all, here is Jupiter getting ready to make those waxing squares to Chiron, as you see on your screen. I don't know if you remember, they had that one conjunction, spring 23, mid-Aries. So here's first quarter squares, crises in action, manifestation. So here's choice points for self-healing and healing as a collective. Well, we got public healthcare systems, veterans healthcare systems in the United States. Stay tuned. We'll see. There are things with the Robert Kennedy it's Robert Kennedy, I think, who I don't remember what the term is. I'm winding down here, so I'm not pulling it out of my left brain as easy. But I mean, with diet, exercise, and rest, and some of the nutrition stuff, I really agree with him. But there is a place in the world sometimes for vaccinations. Polio used to be awful, awful. if you were growing up at the beginning of the last century, and we eradicated it. Although there are a few cases showing up again. It's the healthcare issue that Mitch McConnell suffered from, which is why he's always had that limp in his gait because of suffering through polio as a child. So we have choice points both directions that'll be happening with Jupiter square Chiron. There's talk, and this was really in Project 2025, the rights book of what they want to do if they got Donald Trump reelected. They want to privatize veterans' health care, and it is very efficient compared to our private healthcare systems for individuals. I know people specifically in veterans healthcare, and I know one person who is in charge of when a veteran can go seek public health care because they can't do it internally, and how much more expensive, 3 to 5 times more expensive, because it's for profit when you go outside the system. We could take what we do with our veterans and what we do with Medicare and expand on that, or we can try to privatize it. Again, lobbying for profit healthcare. This is going to be an issue over Neptune in Aries, and it's going to be part with these squares this year with Republicans coming into Congress. And I think that if veterans who, for the vast majority, are happy with their health care, I think if they understand what's really being gutted, there will be some rebellions taking place on that. So stay tuned. We'll see how that goes. You know, the US is just coming off of a Chiron return, which happens about every 51 years. Okay. So Jupiter in Cancer is also going to make first quarter squares to the USA Chiron. So here is one more specific to the USA chart that is going to work its way through, whether we include, exclude, with the whole concept of health and healing. So, what regulations will we throw out? What regulations will we advance? Will it work for all of us? Will it work for the few? Will it work for the pharmaceutical companies and the insurance companies? Will it work for the public? We don't know. Stay tuned. Moving on, because I got to get through here. We're almost done. Uranus in Gemini. Here are your dates. And as you can see on your screen, Uranus is going to make 5 waxing sextiles to Neptune. They last had 3 conjunctions in 1993 between 18 and 20 degrees Capricorn. Here we're dealing with the interface between science and technology and religion and spirituality. We could almost say that Uranus-Neptune is relating to the Piscean age ending, Neptune ruled, and the Aquarian age beginning, Uranus ruled. No one has an exact date, okay? 2100-year cycles, hundreds of years of transitions. But you can see Uranus on your screen here as it goes into Gemini and retrogrades back into Taurus this year in 2025. Just briefly, a couple of slides. Again, my Great Ingress Decade Workshop has 90 minutes on Uranus and Gemini if you are interested. How many of you were aware that the Revolutionary War in the United States, our Civil War, and World War I took place with Uranus and Gemini? The Civil War took place with Uranus and Gemini and Neptune in Aries, and we're repeating them now throughout the rest of the decade. those two transits. Whew. Pray for peace. Pray for peace. Technological advances explode beyond our imaginations. We struggle to keep up with the changes. Who will evolve into highly advanced societies and who will be left behind? How will those phones in our hands work to do more and more and more for us, even in third world countries? They are trying to crack down in the US on Zelle and Venmo and the apps that exchange money between people without any fees. Go down to Africa and your third world countries do it all over the place with no fees. Go to China and they do it all over the place with no fees. How will that turn out in the US? Stay tuned. There really is a movement afoot to get fee exchanges, no matter what app you use to exchange just money on a what's it called? Fiat, a non-physical, non-coin, non-paper money or way. So there's always that danger of a miscommunication setting off unexpected wars. We can have social media propaganda that create wars off the field. Are we going to be a country that force antitrust monopolies to break up? How much overwhelmed do we go into with Uranus in Gemini? Here again, it's going to be so important to be able to have that inner calming down in your world so that you're not going so crazy. Uranus in Gemini will also exacerbate Uranus, air element, Gemini, air element. It will exasperate mental health issues, PTSD situations, post-traumatic stress disorder. What countries are going to address these issues on a public level? What countries are going to blame the individual or a specific group or society rather than look at it as a collective issue that we are having to deal with? The individuated unconsciousness, Uranus, is tasked with exploring new ways of living life. Confusion. Mind is unable to process it. We can go what's called brain switching. Left brain, right brain, left brain, right brain. I can't make sense of anything. Again, quieting down so we can listen to the sage polarity of our own intuition and process what makes sense for us. What's bottom line for us? It's potential that new healing methods can come through, forbidden methods. Think the mushrooms, I don't pronounce words correctly. You know what I'm saying? Hallucinogenic. I got that word. Mushrooms can come back and be used in a micro level on therapeutic processes. You know, can we work with healing generations of trauma in our world? Again, I'm barely touching on subjects you probably just with your own awareness can recognize. Uranus and Gemini is just going to, you know, take things and just really speed it up, create change, technology moving forward, no matter how you look at it. I wanted to show you this. This is in my great ingress decade. We are getting ready. This is what starts this year in 2025. I use this because I went with Pluto and Aquarius, Neptune and Aries, Uranus and Gemini. As they make these transits into these signs this decade, if we put Pluto at 0 degrees, we're going to see Uranus make waxing trines to it. We're going to see Neptune finish its waxing sextiles to Pluto. 13 of them. There's your dates starting next year. This year, here's those waxing sextiles that Uranus is going to make to Neptune 5 times in the next 3 years. So I wanted to give you a visual of that, okay? And so here again are those 5 sextiles. Uranus has actually made it 60 degrees around the circle from when they had their Capricorn conjunctions from Uranus Neptune conjunctions 93. Capricorn flavor. It's a 172-year cycle of spiritual evolution and societal revolutions. I did say, or I used to say, they had conjunctions in the 1820s, and that's when the Industrial Revolution exploded. It started before that, but that's where we had massive social displacements because manufacturing machinery took over what we used to do by hand. And I said from the 1993 conjunctions, that's when we had the information revolution start. I got my first desktop computer in 95. How many of you started your first computers in the 90s? I can't remember when I got my first cell phone. But here we are, crescent phase or waxing sextiles. They're yin, so we're reviewing, but it's how do we sustain and build upon the new beginnings? Technology, serving spirituality, Uranus Neptune to the degree the public demands it. Religious denial of science is harder and harder to maintain. Technology can evolve spirituality, but spirituality has to monitor technology. Think of AI with no ethics. And all of a sudden, we're creating weird beings of different species because we don't have any rules and laws around it. It's happening in places all over the world. You might see that coming out in the news with these sextiles over the next few years, and Uranus in Gemini and Neptune in Aries, creating new life forms on the planet. So there's a lot of belief system debates with these sextiles around the whole issue of technology. And it's going to affect us, all over the place. You can see it's going to affect us economically, food, clothing, shelter. It's definitely going to affect us when it comes to health and wellness and medicines, who has them, who doesn't, et cetera, et cetera. Stay tuned. We can look at more of those as they come along over the next few years, but kind of pay attention to this because sometimes those sextiles can get lost in the midst of everything. But these are outer moving planets, and between Uranus, hold on a second, between Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, even though these are nice aspects, sextiles and trines, doesn't mean they're going to necessarily be progressive. Will have a lot to do with what the masses rise up and choose to do. Aquarius. Here are the lunar eclipses, which are going to come this fall. So when we run into, not lunar eclipses, here's the south node eclipse season, excuse me. When we have south node eclipses in Virgo, the intent is going to be to let go and self-love and heal ourselves as best as possible. Distortions will be wanting to blame others, judge and persecute others. Those patriarchal distortions of sadomasochisms can rise up loud and proud in that consensus state. We can, who's going to persecute who, but who's going to stand up for those that we need to stand up for? We can find that both that natal Mars Neptune square and the Sun Saturn squares are activated. And so Our religious and social history is going to be coming up with collective issues. How will Supreme Court cases turn out, especially around separation of church and state? We talked about that a little bit with the North Node eclipses, but we may find South Node eclipse season, especially with the conservative control of all three branches of government. We may see two steps back instead of two steps forward. Again, goes down to, do we include or exclude? Here's the, oh, okay, I put him in here. I'm already tired of talking about this guy. I have had to do my own detach and objectify and choose new ways to fill my space. He doesn't get free rent in my head anymore like he used to. When we get to the South Node eclipse season, what we will find happen is that the transiting nodes will be squaring his natal nodes. This is when I am wondering if the public, which is the masses, which is moon rule, which is related to the nodes of the moon, which is emotionally based, do we see the public starting to say, oh my gosh, what did we do? We got to do 4 more years of this person all over again? Will they find themselves, really starting to look at some of the facts and, objectify them rather than, do a Neptunian remembrance of how fond it was his first 4 years when he actually inherited Obama's economy? Stay tuned. The Jupiter retrograde cycle will go retrograde just before his Venus. It will go 3 times over his Saturn. It will square itself 3 times. We'll see what happens. If more sane individuals in his administration cannot talk sense into him in recognizing that tariffs are just increasing the prices the public pays in this country. If they cannot help him see that, and he goes through with tariffs, and other countries this time around say, we're not going to let you play games on us, we may really see things starting to happen with our pocketbooks by this time, the end of this year, starting this fall into the last few months, going into next year. The honeymoon may be over, probably, is the point that I am really trying to say here. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to go too much into his chart. I think we're all familiar with this person. Again, we're going to have to just watch and see how it unfolds with who actually ends up in his administration this time around. Will the Senate, approve all his nominations, or will they actually put up resistance? Stay tuned.
Kim?
Yes.
Okay, you have another slide. Go ahead now. And then we have a question from the board.
Is it on this subject?
Well, is on the Virgo Pisces. Can you articulate the mantras for Virgo Pisces eclipses? From Nona. She wants to clarify the mantras for Virgo Pisces in
Hold on,
terms of
hold on,
how
hold
the
on.
eclipses.
Yes, hold on. I will help you out here. Oh gosh.
Thank you
So
for letting me change off the political subject.
yeah, no problem. I was moving off it anyway. Other than I do have the USA chart. I ran Jeffrey Wolf Green's school from 2002 to 2008. And when I took it over, in 2002 and started reorganizing everything, I created some evolutionary astrology mantras. If you are interested in them, you can email me. I think we may have them posted on our site. Maybe we can put the PDF in this YouTube comment section, Media Monk. But my mantra for Virgo: I discern with intuitive wholeness. I discern Virgo with intuitive wholeness. Pisces. The evolutionary astrology mantra I created for Pisces: I am in wholeness with my reality. I am in wholeness, Pisces, with my reality, Virgo. And whole is WHOLENESS. So those are my EA mantras for Virgo and Pisces, which you can use interchangeably with this nodal axis transit. And I will put them in my Pisces Virgo webinar next week for you. And so just one more thing that I was going to say here with this South Node solar eclipse. I was talking earlier about the department or about Veterans Health Care. Today, almost half of the Department of Defense budget goes to veterans and families health care. And this is because the history of imperialism with the US is we had to be, exceptional, and we had to go create wars all over the place. And so there's something to be said for the conservative viewpoint that, why are we spending the military industrial complex, which, by the way, really needs to be revamped. If any of you subscribe to the Atlantic magazine, you can probably go get this for free too. But they have an excellent expose about how our military preparedness always wants to go big and strong. And now we have all these little hybrid wars, and now we have these drones that, somebody can take and make and do things that, on almost zero budget. And so our military preparedness is stuck back in World War II. Other than we want all this big and powerful. And by the way, I live by an Air Force base, and they're spending buku bucks for us to get a new bomber that's supposed to show up here in the next few years. And we're going to have our city of 80,000 is going to get 10,000 more military personnel with their families moving in. They're already starting just to support this new big bomber that's going to cost, I don't know, let's just say $5 billion per bomber, and they're going to give us 150 of them. Ridiculous stuff, not how wars are being fought anymore. So even though this takes up almost half of the Department of Defense, taking care of our veterans due to all the wars that we had to initiate, to privatize that will make those expenses go up even more. And then what will put the cost on the veterans themselves? I think this might be a hidden issue that is just going to really explode at some point for people, if they really try to go through with changing this in Congress. Stay tuned. I didn't use a lot with the United States chart. This is the last of my charts. Here's an article by Michael Mukasey, who did a bunch of research based upon old letters of Congress, with Benjamin Franklin quoting the Declaration of Independence signed at between 9 and 11 on July 4th. I just resonated with the US being a fifth house Pluto, basically thinking that it's the biggest and the best and full of itself. Regardless of which July 4th chart you use, there are three major aspects that really show our inclusive, exclusive trends weaving back and forth in this country over the last 250 years. Here is the North Node lunar eclipse that really emphasizes the Neptune transits to the Uranus Neptune squares that we had. So, the whole education thing, the whole health and wellness thing, the healthcare, all of our racial stuff, that can come to a head in the news again, can show up no matter which July 4th chart you use. And then here in the fall is the South Node lunar eclipse that comes up when we still have the nodal axis on Neptune and squaring that Mars. Okay. We still have these issues that can be going on. And then with the Jupiter in Cancer, the nationalism, and who do we include, exclude, who gets resources and who doesn't get resources. Again, I'm at my 2 hour limit, so I'm not going to do much more expose into those. I guess one of the final things that I would say for you, and I'm going to, excuse me, I'm just going to double check my notes here. Huh. Yes. In 2027 and 2028, transiting Pluto in Aquarius will go over the south node of the USA 5 times, 2 retrograde cycles. And this is going to be pretty, this south node at 6 degrees Aquarius, 35 minutes, is going to be fairly accurate no matter what time you use July 4th, 1776. 5 times, 2 retrograde cycles, Pluto and Aquarius over the south node of the moon. This is when I see the real Aquarian rebellions rising up. Stay tuned. We will see what happens with Republicans in the executive and congressional branches of the government over the next year, over the next 2 years, and we're going to start to really see what works and what doesn't work and where the rebellions will rise up come 26, 27. Oh, just in time for the next USA presidential election. Wonder if Donald Trump's going to say, I want to run again. Stay tuned. All right. Here again, meet you 1 week from now with the nodal axis transit and Virgo Pisces. I'll get the EA mantras in there for you. Here's my next Mercury retrograde. I'll include some Venus in there. I am participating this Sunday with an EA Zoom discussion panel. Oh, I didn't put the time in. The time is 11 a.m. Pacific, okay? So that you can see that for yourselves. Here's that Venus lecture with the Washington State Astrological Association, and I am lecturing at NARWAC this year. So I would love to see some of you. I'm going to talk on Pluto and Aquarius effect on sexuality through the 12 houses. So if you come in May, please, please, please come up and introduce yourself to me. All righty. Any comments or questions? Leroy, I haven't looked at anything so that I can just focus. Are there any questions that I need to address? Hey, honey, unmute yourself.
We're all clear. Thank you for participating, everyone.
Hey, thank you for hanging in there for 12 hours, everybody. Leroy, I would like to read what was in the chat pane, and I don't know if I can do that once you cut us all off. So can you just stop the recording and let me
Sure.
read the chats in case there's anything that I need to address for us?